What's up guys, my name's Splice Knight and welcome back to Reflection. So today we're going to be talking about a show that I have honestly loved for a long time. And honestly, I feel like it doesn't get enough, first of all, recognition or attention at all. I've looked all over YouTube and I see maybe 5 videos on this particular content, and that is the show Detentionaire. Now, for those of you, which is probably the majority, you've never heard of the show Detentionaire because it's a Canadian production that was kind of created in 2014 that lasted for essentially 2 seasons, that was broken up in Canada into 3 seasons but aired in Australia and internationally as kind of 2 seasons, and they also aired earlier than Canada for some reason despite being made in this country. With that said guys, getting onto the actual piece, one of the things I think that really needs to be addressed about this show is it was an absolute masterpiece. Now, there are a lot of complaints that people will have about the animation, which is fair. It was done in Flash, and some of the visual motifs are definitely not going to be to a lot of people's tastes. Myself personally, I really dug them. I thought they were interesting and different, but I can definitely see why you'd have a problem with that. Now, as to why they were really well done is, first of all, the writing was incredibly solid. It was really well made. There were so many different layers to a lot of what was going on, whether it was the background on a lot of the motivations of the characters. They had all these like multi-layered, faceted reasons for doing everything they did, whether it was hanging out with the main character, Li Ping, or whether they were helping someone, or whether they were just in general being a dick. There were different reasons for all different things, and a lot of the times what myself or the audience and Lee were thinking ends up getting completely tossed out the window as sort of a red herring. So you're constantly in the field of red herrings as you're going through the show, which is honestly really cool because I don't see a lot of shows that, I guess, play with your perceptions. They don't essentially give you this thing where, oh, this is what you think's gonna happen, but actually it's this. But they do actually maintain enough continuity within the show for you to know if you're really looking in depth at every frame and all the different points where you're seeing other characters. You can definitely see characters that will kind of lean your expectation of who the bad guy is in one direction or the other. For example, one of the awesome red herrings that they put in was this idea that the main principal, the guy who's like big, he's got the typical villain look to him with his cyborg eye and all these added parts to him that definitely don't fit in as a normal part of the narrative. Now, that said, that ends up being, spoilers by the way, that ends up being a total subversion. While he is not himself actually a bad guy, in fact he ends up helping Li Ping and crew a lot, even though they're not entirely aware of this fact. It ends up being a completely different person that is pulling all the strings, as well as the fact of the actual reveal of the person who framed Li Ping in the original storyline for this thing that essentially led to him unraveling all these secrets.
What darnation's going on? Oh yeah, it's
So a decent summary of what Detentionaire is about in the beginning is this attempt to try and figure out who framed Li Ping, the main character, for a massive prank that got him in detention for an entire year, which is actually where the name Detentionaire comes from. Someone who is consistently in detention, stuck there almost indefinitely or very, very commonly. Now, it's interesting because even though Li Ping is the Detentionaire, his comrade in arms, Biffy, who is both the Tank and the Heart of Gold character, which is just kind of hilarious to see play out the way that they do, especially when they do some meta call-outs to this sort of thing. But the whole point is seeing Li Ping, the Detentionaire, solve this mystery of who framed him, and then as that ends up slowly happening, him completely stumbling onto this totally different mystery with way more deep-reaching implications on a insane, over-the-top scale, which I think is just, it's done in such a way that you are constantly looking for answers, you're constantly excited and wondering what's going on, and if you go into this particular show with a inquisitive and analytical mind, you might find out who it is, but there are so many red herrings and things that will tip you off to different things and ideas and possibilities of who it might be, that you're not entirely sure who it's supposed to be. And in fact, there's so many questions, especially when you actually get to start hearing from the bad guy, the person who is responsible for framing Lee, aka Rad Circles, which is actually a pseudonym used for a different character who was essentially vanished for reasons relevant to the plot that I don't want to spoil 100%. But the crazy thing about this particular show is that it's so difficult to say anything specific about it without spoiling the absolute masterfully crafted story that they've built around this. It's interweaving this idea of character development and story progression so tightly that you can almost not tell the difference, because as Lee slowly develops as a person, the plot itself also develops. The other thing that they're huge on in this show is their use of cliffhangers at the end of every episode. It's become this thing that you're either going to love it or hate it, and you might even hate it, because the thing about these cliffhangers is that it's every episode, and they are generally strong questions, because at the end of the episode, oh, you've got an answer, but it only asks more questions, which I think is a brilliant way to kind of introduce someone to a more detective centric sort of TV show. So it's essentially like an animated version of Sherlock if he was in high school and attempting to uncover a way larger mystery through slower and more minor mysteries that are being solved and dealt with along the way, as well as trying to retrieve certain items so that you can get different kinds of proof and ideas of what's going on. So honestly, it's really well made, and I would recommend it to anybody who has a fanfare for the mystery genre and for detective genre and that sort of thing, because it definitely does keep you on your toes, and you're learning things at the same time as Lee. So if you are going to analyze the crap out of it, this is your show for that sort of thing. There's definitely different comparisons that you could draw to Gravity Falls and other shows like Sherlock, as I've already done. You might believe that they are definitely the superior show because of the popularity that they have. I mean, hell, Sherlock fans have been waiting for the hiatus that they've been on for the last forever to finally get over with so that they can get new episodes. And I totally get that. There is definitely a huge fan base, but personally, I think the fact of the matter is that Detentionaire has a relatively tiny fan base, and those that are part of the fan base either are on to other things now and they don't seem to give it the level of recognition that I personally think it deserves, because it's such a tightly woven story, a beautifully crafted analysis of characters and motivations and attitudes and behaviors, as well as trying to figure out the story faster than Lee, even though it's incredibly difficult for the most part to do that. You know, you'll point fingers any which way to try and figure something out, but there's so much going on that kind of misleads and or redirects your possibilities and your thoughts. And when I was watching this originally, it was on the TV where I had to come back every week and watch it, and honestly, it was a blast, because it's so good. But you can totally binge the crap out of it because it's a very close-knit storyline, and it's just related every single episode, having everything to do with everything prior, and just, I cannot sing its praises enough. I just think it's a beautifully made story. The motivations of the characters, the attitudes, and the way that people are done. First of all, they're relatively consistent in their base ideas, which is fantastic to see in a show where they don't sort of flip and flop all the time and depending on the plot. Because I hate it when characters essentially move around and change their ideas for the plot. I find that's really, really annoying, because it just feels like the characters are there to serve the plot, as opposed to the other side, where this is essentially the character and the plot all serve the same sort of narrative and are able to more effectively bring something interesting to the table like Detentionaire. Anyway guys, that's a lot of me rambling and a little bit of nonsense, but I really hope you did enjoy this video. If you did, and if you're familiar with Detentionaire, don't forget to hit that like button. If you want to hear more about this, don't forget to subscribe and comment down below. Plus, you gotta hit that notification bell so that you can see every single time I upload, in case it's a new Detentionaire video or otherwise. That said guys, thank you so much for watching. My name is Splice Knight, and I will see you in the next video. Splice out.